He thought stealing her idea would make him the smartest man in the room, but by the end of that meeting, the entire company would watch his career collapse in complete silence. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe to the channel and support our work so we can keep bringing you powerful stories like this one every week. Because sometimes the quietest people carry the strongest truths. The rain hammered against the towering glass windows of Caldwell and Pierce Marketing Group as employees hurried through the revolving doors with paper cups of coffee and glowing laptop bags slung over their shoulders. 32 floors above downtown Chicago, the executive conference room buzzed with anticipation. LED screens glowed blue against polished marble walls, while senior executives arranged leather folders in front of them. It was the kind of room where million-dollar decisions were made in under 10 minutes. At the far end of the table sat Claire Bennett, barely noticed by anyone entering the room. Her soft gray cardigan blended into the muted corporate colors around her. Her blonde hair was tied back neatly, and a slim notebook rested quietly beside her laptop. Most people in the company knew her only as the quiet woman from the strategy department who stayed late fixing presentation errors nobody else caught. Nobody knew she had spent the last 8 months building the campaign that was about to redefine the company's future. Claire watched silently as Ethan Caldwell entered the room with the confidence of a man who had never once doubted his own importance. His navy Italian suit fit perfectly against his broad shoulders, and the expensive silver watch on his wrist caught the overhead lights as he greeted executives with practiced charm. Conversations shifted around him naturally. People laughed louder when he spoke. Junior employees straightened in their chairs the moment he walked by. Ethan enjoyed that effect on people. He lived for it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced smoothly as the room settled into silence, "today you're going to see the campaign that will put this company ahead of every competitor in the country." Claire lowered her eyes toward her notebook as the first slide illuminated the giant screen behind him. Her stomach tightened instantly. White background, black minimalist font. A single red slogan centered perfectly beneath the company logo. It was hers, every detail, every phrase, every psychological trigger. The exact campaign she had emailed Ethan 3 weeks earlier after he claimed he wanted to mentor emerging talent. Her fingers slowly curled around her pen while executives nodded in admiration. Ethan paced confidently beside the screen like a man unveiling his masterpiece. "Consumers don't buy products anymore," he said. "They buy emotional identity. They buy belonging." Claire felt coldness spread through her chest. Those were her exact words. Even the pauses between sentences sounded rehearsed from their private conversations. Around the room, department heads scribbled notes while the CEO leaned forward with growing interest. Nobody noticed Claire sitting silently near the corner of the table. Nobody noticed the way her breathing slowed as realization settled over her completely. Ethan continued speaking with increasing confidence, feeding off the approval in the room. "This campaign came to me after months of studying consumer vulnerability and emotional attachment patterns," he explained proudly. "Sometimes innovation requires seeing what others overlook." A few executives nodded in admiration. One even whispered, "Brilliant." Then Ethan smiled slightly and glanced toward the lower end of the table where Claire sat almost invisible beneath the fluorescent lights. "Some people are good at taking notes," he said casually. "But leaders create vision." Soft laughter rippled through the room. Claire remained perfectly still. Her expression never changed, but something behind her eyes quietly hardened. Outside, thunder rolled across the Chicago skyline, while reflections of city lights shimmered against the glass walls. Ethan kept speaking, completely unaware that the quiet woman he had just humiliated had already begun preparing the evidence that would destroy him in front of everyone sitting in that room. And for the first time all morning, Claire Bennett stopped looking hurt. She started looking patient. The meeting ended with applause echoing softly across the executive floor, while employees gathered around Ethan Caldwell, offering congratulations and forced laughter. Claire closed her notebook carefully and slipped it into her worn leather bag without saying a word. Nobody stopped her. Nobody even looked in her direction. Outside the conference room, the office hummed with the usual rhythm of corporate life. Phones rang endlessly. Espresso machines hissed near the break area. Computer monitors reflected endless spreadsheets and advertising mock-ups across rows of polished desks. Claire walked through it all quietly, her low heels tapping softly against the dark hardwood floors while conversations floated around her like distant static. Did you see the CEO's face during Ethan's presentation? One employee whispered excitedly near the elevators. He is definitely getting promoted after this. Claire kept walking. Her expression remained calm, but inside, something heavy had settled into place. By noon, downtown Chicago had disappeared beneath sheets of cold rain. Gray clouds pressed low against the skyline, while traffic lights reflected in the wet streets 30 floors below. Claire sat alone in the small employee cafe near the back corner window, eating a turkey sandwich she had packed from home inside a reusable container. Around her, groups of coworkers laughed over catered salads and expensive coffee orders, discussing the morning presentation like it was already company history. Nobody invited Claire to join them. That was normal. It had always been normal. She had worked at Caldwell and Pierce for nearly 4 years, yet most employees barely remembered her name. To them, she was simply the quiet strategist who fixed formatting issues before deadlines and stayed late organizing campaign data no one else wanted to touch. But Claire noticed things other people ignored. She noticed how Ethan never answered direct questions unless executives were watching. She noticed how junior employees who challenged him slowly disappeared from important projects. She noticed how credit moved upward while blame always traveled down. And most of all, she noticed how easily powerful people confused silence with weakness. Her laptop chimed softly beside her plate. New email. Sender, Ethan Caldwell. Claire opened it slowly. Excellent restraint in the meeting today, the message read. I appreciate your professionalism. Remember, successful people understand how to contribute without needing recognition. Claire stared at the screen while rainwater crawled slowly down the cafe windows behind her. A second message appeared moments later. Also, beginning next week, your role will shift away from campaign development. Human resources will provide details. Claire read the sentence twice. The coldness in Ethan's strategy became instantly clear. He was removing her before she could become a threat. Across the room, television screens mounted near the ceiling replayed a local business segment discussing rising marketing trends. Bright colors flashed across smiling faces while upbeat music filled the silence. Claire slowly closed her laptop. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark screen. Tired blue eyes, loose strands of blonde hair falling near her cheek. A woman most people would dismiss within seconds. But beneath that calm exterior lived a mind Ethan had underestimated badly. Late that evening, long after most employees had gone home, Claire sat alone beneath the pale fluorescent lights of the strategy department. Entire rows of desks stood empty around her, while the city glowed outside the giant windows like scattered gold beneath the storm clouds. She opened a folder buried deep inside her desktop archives. Inside were months of research files, time-stamped drafts, voice memos, and presentation concepts connected to the campaign Ethan now claimed as his own. Claire clicked carefully through each file in complete silence. Her movements were slow, methodical, controlled. She was not angry anymore. Anger was loud. This felt different. This felt precise. Somewhere down the hallway, a janitor pushed a cleaning cart across marble floors while the office lights dimmed automatically for the night. Claire leaned back slightly in her chair and stared at the glowing evidence spread across her screen. Ethan believed the story was finished because the room had applauded him. But applause was temporary, and the truth had a way of surviving even inside buildings built entirely on polished lies. By Friday morning, the atmosphere inside Caldwell and Pierce had shifted in ways only Claire Bennett, seemed to notice. People smiled differently around Ethan Caldwell now. Executives stopped by his office more frequently. Junior associates laughed harder at his jokes during meetings. Success moved through the company like expensive perfume, invisible but impossible to ignore. And Ethan wore it proudly. Claire arrived at the office at 6:45 that morning, carrying the same faded leather bag and paper coffee cup she brought every day. The lobby security guard nodded politely as she crossed the marble floor beneath towering chrome columns and glowing digital advertisements displaying Ethan's new campaign across every screen in the building. Bold ideas change everything. The slogan read in sharp white letters. Her slogan. Claire stepped into the elevator silently beside two coworkers from the creative department. Neither acknowledged her presence. The board loved Ethan's strategy. One whispered excitedly, "I heard the New York office wants him leading national expansion now." The other laughed softly. "Honestly, he deserves it. That campaign was genius." Claire kept her eyes on the glowing elevator numbers while cold fluorescent light reflected against the brushed steel walls around them. 27 floors up, the strategy department looked exactly as it always had. Quiet rows of desks. The faint smell of printer toner and burnt coffee. Computer monitors glowing beneath low white ceilings. Yet something felt different now. Conversations stopped when Claire walked past. Invitations to meetings disappeared from her calendar. Shared documents she once managed were suddenly locked. Even the receptionist avoided eye contact. It was subtle, professional, carefully coordinated. Ethan was isolating her. Around 9:30 that morning, Claire received a calendar notification requesting her presence in human resources. No subject line. No explanation. She already knew why. The Human Resources office sat near the executive wing behind frosted glass walls and muted beige carpeting that softened every footstep. Claire entered quietly and found Melissa Grant waiting beside a conference table with folded hands and a sympathetic smile that looked rehearsed. Melissa had worked in human resources for nearly 12 years. She was known throughout the company for speaking gently while delivering devastating decisions. "Thank you for coming, Claire," she said softly. "Please have a seat." Claire sat calmly across from her while rain clouds gathered outside the windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Melissa opened a thin folder and adjusted her glasses carefully. "There have been concerns raised regarding your collaboration style and communication challenges within the department," she explained. "Several team leaders feel you struggle with maintaining a cooperative environment." Claire listened without interrupting. Every sentence sounded polished, legal, safe. Specifically, Melissa continued carefully, "There are reports suggesting frustration over project ownership and difficulty adapting to leadership decisions." Claire almost smiled at the wording, project ownership. Such clean language for theft. "I see," she replied quietly. Melissa studied her for a moment, perhaps expecting anger or tears. Instead, Claire remained perfectly composed. That seemed to unsettle her more. "To be clear," Melissa added gently, "this is not disciplinary action. We simply believe your strengths may be better utilized in a support-focused role moving forward." Support-focused. Claire understood exactly what that meant: reduced visibility, no strategic input, no access to high-level development meetings. Ethan was not simply stealing her work anymore. He was erasing her from the room entirely. Outside the office, thunder rolled faintly across the city while employees hurried through hallways carrying reports and laptops beneath bright fluorescent lights. Business continued normally. Nobody noticed the quiet woman sitting inside Human Resources, watching her career slowly being dismantled with corporate politeness and carefully chosen vocabulary. Melissa slid a printed document across the table. "We would like you to review the transition proposal over the weekend." Claire glanced down at the paper but did not touch it. Instead, she looked calmly toward the window where gray clouds hung low above the skyline. Then she asked one simple question. Did Ethan Caldwell submit the complaint personally? The silence that followed answered everything. Melissa's expression shifted almost imperceptibly before she lowered her eyes toward the folder. And in that tiny moment, Claire finally understood something important. Ethan was afraid, truly afraid, because people who feel powerful do not work this hard to silence someone unless they know the truth could destroy them. The weekend passed beneath cold Chicago rain and low gray skies, while Claire Bennett sat alone inside her small apartment on the north side of the city, surrounded by stacks of notebooks, printed market reports, and glowing folders spread across her dining table. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of an old refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic below her window. A single lamp cast warm yellow light across the room, while steam drifted slowly from untouched tea growing cold beside her laptop. Claire had always lived simply. No luxury furniture, no expensive artwork, just clean shelves lined with books about behavioral psychology, branding strategy, and consumer analytics collected over years of quiet obsession. Most people inside Caldwell and Pierce would have been shocked to see how deeply she understood the very industry they assumed she merely supported from the background. Her eyes moved carefully across hundreds of archived files stored inside encrypted folders on her laptop. Presentation drafts, research timelines, recorded brainstorming sessions, internal feedback notes. Every document carried timestamps going back nearly 8 months. Ethan Caldwell had not simply stolen a slogan. He had stolen an entire vision built slowly during nights Claire sacrificed while everyone else went home. Yet the deeper she searched, the calmer she became, because evidence removed emotion from the equation, and Claire trusted facts more than feelings. Monday morning arrived sharp and cold. Wind whipped between skyscrapers while commuters crowded downtown sidewalks carrying umbrellas and paper coffee cups through streams of honking traffic. Inside Caldwell and Pierce, preparations for the upcoming national board presentation had consumed the entire executive floor. Ethan's campaign was now scheduled to be unveiled before investors, regional directors, and media partners from across the country. Employees rushed through hallways carrying mock-ups and revised data sheets, while giant digital displays cycled through campaign visuals every few seconds. Ethan moved through the chaos like a celebrity. People stepped aside when he walked past. His confidence had become almost theatrical now. During the afternoon strategy meeting, Claire sat quietly near the back wall, taking notes nobody would ever ask to read. Ethan stood confidently beneath giant presentation screens discussing expansion projections with senior leadership. This campaign represents the future of emotional branding, he declared smoothly. Consumers no longer trust corporations, they trust authenticity. Claire lowered her eyes briefly. Authenticity, the irony almost exhausted her. Then Ethan's gaze drifted toward her across the room. "Claire," he said suddenly, every head turned instantly. "Would you mind printing the revised engagement reports before tomorrow morning?" The request hung in the air longer than necessary. It was not about printing reports. Everyone understood that. Ethan was establishing hierarchy publicly, quietly reducing her from strategist to assistant in front of executives and department heads. Claire met his eyes for only a second. "Of course," she answered calmly. Ethan smiled faintly before returning to his presentation. But near the far side of the room, someone else had noticed the exchange. Daniel Harper from the Information Technology Department sat silently beside the projector controls reviewing server access logs. Unlike most employees, Daniel paid attention to patterns. And over the past few weeks, he had noticed something unusual. Late-night file transfers, archived presentation downloads, executive access requests linked directly to Ethan Caldwell's account. He glanced briefly toward Claire now, studying the quiet woman everyone seemed determined to overlook. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his expression. After the meeting ended, employees filed out laughing and discussing travel plans for the board presentation scheduled later that week at the company's downtown event center. Claire remained seated for a moment beneath the cold conference room lights, while the city skyline glowed beyond the giant windows. Then she quietly packed her notebook and walked toward the elevator alone. Claire. She turned slightly. Daniel Harper stood near the doorway holding a tablet against his chest. Nervous, hesitant. "You worked on that campaign before Ethan presented it, did you not?" he asked carefully. The hallway fell completely still around them. Claire studied him silently for a moment. Most people avoided questions that dangerous inside corporate buildings like this. Daniel swallowed uneasily before lowering his voice. "Because I think the server archives may prove something important." Somewhere behind them, elevator doors opened with a soft metallic chime while fluorescent lights reflected across polished marble floors. And for the first time since Ethan Caldwell stole her work, Claire realized she was no longer standing completely alone. That evening, the wind off Lake Michigan rattled the windows of Caldwell and Pierce, while most of the building sat nearly empty beneath dimmed office lights and silent hallways. Claire Bennett remained at her desk long after sunset, the pale glow from her monitor reflecting softly across her tired face. Outside, downtown Chicago shimmered beneath cold rain and streams of red brake lights stretching endlessly through the streets below. The strategy department had become almost ghost-like after hours. Empty chairs, silent printers, forgotten coffee cups sitting beside abandoned keyboards. Claire preferred the office this way. Quiet spaces revealed truths loud rooms tried to hide. Across her screen, dozens of archived files sat open beside detailed timeline records Daniel Harper had quietly forwarded from the company's server. Ethan Caldwell's access logs were now impossible to ignore. File downloads at 1:30 in the morning, unauthorized transfers from Claire's private project folders. Metadata proving campaign drafts existed months before Ethan ever presented them publicly. Every piece fit together with terrifying precision. Claire leaned back slowly in her chair, staring at the evidence while the storm pressed harder against the windows. Most people would have felt triumph discovering proof like this. Claire felt something else entirely. Sadness. Not for herself, for the company. Because once trust disappeared inside a workplace, every smiling hallway became theater. Her phone buzzed softly beside the keyboard. A text message from her younger sister, Emily, appeared on the screen. "Did you eat dinner yet?" Claire stared at the message for a moment before replying simply, "Working late again." Seconds later, Emily answered, "Dad used to say people who stay quiet see everything first." Claire's eyes softened slightly. Their father had spent 30 years repairing commuter trains outside Milwaukee, grease-stained hands, steel-toed boots, long winters waking before sunrise. He never trusted loud people. "Confidence without character is just performance," he used to tell them. Claire remembered those words now more clearly than ever. Down the hallway, elevator doors opened with a soft metallic sound. Footsteps echoed faintly across marble floors before Daniel Harper appeared carrying 2 paper coffee cups. "I guessed you were still here," he said awkwardly. Claire accepted the coffee with a small nod of gratitude. Daniel sat carefully across from her desk, lowering his voice instinctively despite the empty office around them. "I checked deeper into the archives," he admitted quietly. "Ethan deleted several server histories last week." Claire looked up slowly. "Can they be recovered?" Daniel hesitated before giving a small nervous smile. "People think deleting files removes them forever. Usually it just hides them from people who do not know where to look." He slid a flash drive carefully across the desk. "Everything is on there. Original uploads, timestamps, revision history, even audio backups from internal brainstorming sessions." Claire stared at the small silver drive resting beneath the office lights. Months of manipulation now condensed into something small enough to fit inside her palm. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. Daniel looked toward the darkened conference rooms lining the hallway. "Because I watched Ethan take credit from 3 different people this year," he admitted quietly. "Nobody said anything because he protects people above him and destroys people below him." His jaw tightened slightly. "And honestly, I am tired of pretending that is leadership." Silence settled between them while rainwater slid slowly down the giant windows overlooking the city. Somewhere far below, sirens echoed faintly through downtown traffic. Claire finally reached for the flash drive carefully, almost reverently. "Thank you," she said. Daniel nodded once before standing to leave, but near the elevator, he paused. "The National Board presentation is Thursday night," he said without turning around. "All senior executives will be there. Investors, too." Claire understood immediately. Ethan's biggest moment would also become his most vulnerable one. After Daniel disappeared into the elevator, Claire remained alone beneath the pale, fluorescent lights, holding the flash drive tightly in her hand. Then she opened her laptop one final time and began organizing every document with calm, surgical precision. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but because truth deserved witnesses. And somewhere inside the glowing skyline beyond those windows, Ethan Caldwell was still celebrating a victory built entirely on stolen silence. Thursday evening arrived beneath a sky the color of cold steel as Blacktown cars lined the entrance of the Palmer Grand Conference Center in downtown Chicago. Inside the towering glass building, chandeliers cast golden light across polished marble floors, while executives, investors, and regional directors moved through the lobby dressed in tailored suits and expensive evening dresses. Waiters carried silver trays through clusters of conversation, while giant digital screens displayed the company logo beside glowing campaign graphics that now represented the future of Caldwell and Pierce. Ethan Caldwell stood near the center of it all, smiling confidently as board members greeted him with admiration. His navy tuxedo fit perfectly. His posture radiated effortless control. Tonight was supposed to be the defining moment of his career. National expansion contracts were already waiting for final approval. Media outlets had arrived to cover the campaign launch. Even the CEO seemed unusually energized as photographers snapped pictures beneath towering presentation screens. Ethan accepted every compliment with polished humility while secretly enjoying every second of attention. Across the massive ballroom, Claire Bennett entered almost unnoticed. Her charcoal gray dress was elegant but simple, the kind chosen by someone uninterested in competing for attention. She carried no designer purse, no jewelry beyond a small silver watch. Most guests barely looked at her as she moved quietly through the crowd beneath soft piano music and glittering lights. But Claire was not there to be seen. She was there to make sure the truth finally was. Near the ballroom entrance, Daniel Harper adjusted the collar of his suit nervously while checking his phone for the fourth time in 10 minutes. Their plan remained dangerously simple. Claire would wait until Ethan completed his keynote presentation before speaking. No interruptions, no emotional confrontation, only facts, only evidence, only truth placed carefully in front of the people who mattered most. "Are you certain about this?" Daniel asked quietly as Claire approached him near the side hallway. Claire looked through the glass doors toward the glowing ballroom where Ethan laughed confidently beside senior executives. "He made his choice weeks ago," she answered softly. "I am simply giving the room the full story." Daniel nodded slowly, though tension remained visible across his face. Exposing someone that powerful inside a room filled with investors and media executives could destroy careers instantly. But Claire no longer looked uncertain. Something about her calmness had changed entirely. She no longer carried herself like someone defending her worth. She looked like someone protecting the truth itself. At 7 sharp, ballroom lights dimmed while guests moved toward round tables arranged beneath enormous crystal chandeliers. The stage illuminated in soft blue light as giant projection screens flickered to life behind the podium. Ethan stepped onto the stage to immediate applause. His smile widened naturally beneath the attention. "Good evening, everyone," he began smoothly. "Tonight is not simply about marketing. Tonight is about understanding people." Claire sat quietly near the back of the ballroom beside Daniel while Ethan's voice echoed confidently through hidden speakers overhead. Every sentence sounded polished, rehearsed, familiar, because nearly every major insight belonged to her. Consumers crave authenticity now more than ever, Ethan continued. People connect emotionally before they connect financially. Claire lowered her eyes briefly. Again, her words, her research, her sleepless nights transformed into applause for another person. Around the ballroom, executives nodded approvingly while investors whispered excitedly among themselves. Ethan moved confidently through each slide presentation like a man completely certain of victory. Then the final screen appeared behind him, displaying the campaign slogan in giant glowing letters above the company logo. The audience erupted into applause. Ethan smiled broadly beneath the stage lights while cameras flashed across the ballroom. The CEO himself stood to shake Ethan's hand. "Outstanding work," he announced proudly into the microphone. "This campaign will define our company for the next decade." Applause thundered louder now. Ethan basked in it completely. But then the CEO asked one simple question. "Tell us, Ethan," he said with admiration still visible across his face. "How long did it take you to create something this extraordinary?" Ethan adjusted his cufflinks calmly and stepped toward the microphone with practiced confidence. "Great ideas," he began smoothly, "usually arrive when people least expect them." And at that exact moment, Claire Bennett quietly rose from her chair near the back of the ballroom. The movement itself barely made a sound, but somehow, the entire atmosphere inside the room shifted instantly. At first, almost nobody paid attention to Claire Bennett standing near the back of the ballroom. The applause for Ethan Caldwell still echoed softly beneath the chandeliers, while executives returned to their seats smiling and whispering excitedly about future expansion deals. Ethan himself remained on stage beside the glowing presentation screens, one hand resting confidently against the podium as though the evening already belonged entirely to him. Then Claire spoke. "Actually," she said calmly, her voice carrying farther than anyone expected through the sudden quiet, "I believe I can answer that question." The ballroom slowly stilled. Heads turned one after another beneath the soft golden lighting. Ethan's confident expression flickered for the first time all evening as his eyes found Claire standing motionless near the center aisle. The CEO looked confused. "Claire?" he asked cautiously. She stepped forward slowly, heels tapping softly against polished marble floors while dozens of executives watched her approach the stage. No anger showed on her face, no nervousness, just composure so steady it unsettled the room more than shouting ever could have. Ethan forced a polite smile. "This really is not the appropriate setting," he said lightly into the microphone, attempting humor. A few uncertain laughs scattered weakly through the ballroom before dying almost immediately. Claire stopped several feet from the stage and looked directly at the CEO instead of Ethan. "You asked how long this campaign took to create," she said quietly. "The answer is 8 months." Silence spread across the ballroom like cold air. Ethan adjusted his posture carefully. "Claire," he interrupted smoothly, "perhaps we should discuss whatever misunderstanding this is privately." But Claire continued speaking as though he had not spoken at all. 8 months of behavioral research, consumer interviews, market testing, sleep studies, emotional response mapping. Her voice never rose. "I know because I created every part of it." A hush fell across the ballroom. Ethan's smile disappeared completely now. "That is an extremely serious accusation," he replied carefully, though tension had begun tightening visibly across his jaw. Claire reached calmly into her bag and removed a small silver flash drive. Daniel Harper stood quietly near the ballroom entrance beside the audio-visual control table, his face pale beneath the dim lighting. "Fortunately," Claire said softly, "this is not an accusation." She handed the drive to the event technician standing near the projector console. "It is documentation." Ethan stepped forward sharply now. "Do not plug that in," he snapped instinctively. The sudden edge in his voice shocked the room more than Claire's words had. Executives exchanged uneasy glances while the technician froze uncertainly. The CEO slowly turned toward Ethan, confusion spreading across his face. Why exactly should he not? Ethan opened his mouth, but no answer came immediately. For the first time all night, the man who controlled every room he entered looked unprepared. The technician inserted the flash drive. Seconds later, the giant projection screens behind the stage flickered. A timestamp appeared first, January 14th, then another, February 3rd, March 18th. Original campaign drafts filled the massive screens one after another beneath Claire Bennett's employee credentials and archived server data. Murmurs spread instantly across the ballroom. Ethan's breathing visibly changed now. Faster, tighter. Claire remained completely still while the evidence continued appearing behind him like a slow-moving avalanche. Voice recordings played softly through the ballroom speakers next. Ethan's voice echoed clearly through the room. "This is brilliant, Claire. Leave the executive presentation to me." Another recording followed. "Nobody needs to know where the framework originated." The room went completely silent. Investors stared upward at the screens. Board members leaned forward slowly in their seats. Several executives looked physically uncomfortable now, avoiding eye contact entirely. Ethan stood frozen beneath the towering projection screens while his own words collapsed around him in front of the entire company. "This presentation," Claire said quietly, "was built from work submitted under my name, using files taken directly from my secure development folders." Her calmness somehow made everything worse. She was not humiliating him emotionally. She was dismantling him fact by fact. The CEO slowly stepped away from Ethan as realization settled visibly across his face. Near the front tables, one investor removed his glasses in disbelief, while another quietly closed his folder altogether. Ethan finally attempted to speak again. "I can explain this," he said weakly, but the confidence was gone now, completely gone. Because the room no longer saw a visionary standing beneath those lights. They saw a man exposed by the very person he thought nobody would ever notice. And in the heavy silence that followed, the sound of Ethan Caldwell's reputation collapsing seemed louder than the applause he had received only minutes earlier. For several long seconds, nobody inside the ballroom moved at all. The massive projection screens continued glowing behind Ethan Caldwell, displaying archived emails, timestamps, and internal file records that stripped away every layer of confidence he had carefully built over the years. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead, while hundreds of executives and investors sat frozen beneath the heavy silence now hanging across the room. Ethan looked toward the board members as though searching for someone willing to rescue him from what was happening. Nobody did. The CEO slowly stepped toward the center of the stage, his face pale beneath the ballroom lights. "Is this authentic?" he asked quietly, though the answer already seemed painfully obvious. Daniel Harper stood near the control station and swallowed hard before speaking into the silence. The server records were verified directly from internal archives, he explained carefully. The timestamps cannot be altered retroactively. Every word landed like another crack, spreading through the foundation beneath Ethan's feet. One board member removed his reading glasses and stared upward at the screens in disbelief. Another executive quietly lowered his eyes toward the table, clearly remembering meetings where Claire Bennett had been ignored while Ethan accepted praise built from her work. Claire herself remained calm near the front aisle, hands folded lightly before her, showing none of the triumph many people expected. That calmness unsettled the room most of all. She was not there for revenge. She was there because silence had finally become impossible. Ethan attempted one last smile, but it collapsed almost immediately. "Claire contributed research support," he said weakly. "That is common during campaign development." Claire finally looked directly at him. "Research support does not explain voice recordings of you privately discussing how to remove my name from project files," she replied softly. Another recording began playing automatically through the ballroom speakers. Ethan's own voice echoed clearly again. "Nobody pays attention to people like Claire anyway." A sharp hush fell across the ballroom. Several executives visibly shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while one investor muttered something under his breath and closed his portfolio completely. Ethan's face lost all remaining color. The CEO turned toward him slowly now, disappointment replacing shock. "Is there anything you would like to say before this board proceeds further?" he asked carefully. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out immediately. Because for the first time in years, charm could not save him. Authority could not protect him. The truth had removed every place left to hide. Finally, he lowered his eyes. "I made mistakes," he admitted quietly, but even then the wording felt calculated. Safe, controlled. Claire noticed it instantly. Mistakes. Not theft, not betrayal. Just another polished corporate phrase designed to soften damage. She stepped forward one final time. "You did not make a mistake," she said calmly. "You made a decision." The room went silent again. "You decided that being quiet meant I would never defend myself. You decided that someone without power could be erased without consequence." Ethan stared at the floor while the weight of her words settled over every table in the ballroom. Claire's voice never rose above conversation level, yet every person listened completely now. "I stayed silent for weeks because I believed the company would eventually notice the truth on its own," she continued. "But people often confuse silence with agreement." Near the front row, Melissa Grant from Human Resources slowly lowered her eyes in visible shame. Other employees avoided looking toward Claire entirely. They remembered the meetings, the whispers, the way they watched her disappear without asking why. The CEO inhaled deeply before turning toward the board members seated beside the stage. Quiet discussions followed in low voices while Ethan stood motionless beneath the giant screens, still displaying evidence of everything he had done. Finally, the CEO faced the room again. "Effective immediately," he announced carefully, "Ethan Caldwell is suspended pending full investigation by the board." The ballroom remained completely still. No applause, no celebration, just silence thick enough to feel. Ethan closed his eyes briefly while security and legal representatives approached quietly from the side hallway. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just professionally. The same cold corporate professionalism he once used against Claire. He glanced toward her one final time as though expecting anger or satisfaction. But Claire simply stood there calmly beneath the chandelier light, looking almost sad more than victorious. Because public humiliation had never been her goal. Truth was, and somewhere deep inside that enormous ballroom filled with wealth, status, and polished ambition, people were beginning to understand something painfully simple. The quietest person in the room had seen everything all along. By the following Monday morning, the atmosphere inside Caldwell and Pierce felt completely different. The towering glass headquarters still overlooked downtown Chicago with the same polished elegance, and employees still crossed the marble lobby carrying coffee cups and glowing laptops beneath bright corporate screens. But something invisible had changed inside the building. Conversations were quieter now, more careful. People lowered their voices when discussing leadership, and for the first time in years, employees began looking differently at the quiet people sitting in the corners of conference rooms. Rain tapped softly against the windows as Claire Bennett stepped out of the elevator onto the strategy floor, carrying her familiar leather bag. She wore the same gray cardigan she had worn during Ethan Caldwell's presentation weeks earlier. Nothing about her appearance had changed. Yet as she walked through the office, employees who once ignored her now paused to greet her respectfully. Some offered awkward smiles. Others quickly looked away, embarrassed by how easily they had accepted the story Ethan created. Near the reception desk, Melissa Grant from Human Resources approached carefully, holding a thin folder against her chest. "Claire," she said softly, her voice carrying genuine